Hello everybody, welcome back to another election prediction video. This time we have Vice President Kamala Harris up against former President Donald Trump. So, looking at the map so far, I would just set up the safe blue states before we get into any of the competitive ones. Hawaii is not a swing state. I know some people have said it's going to be likely blue or something like that. I don't think so. I don't think that's going to happen at all. I don't think Kamala Harris is just going to randomly struggle in Hawaii for some reason. I don't think that's going to happen. Nor is she going to struggle in Delaware, like a lot of people thought back in August or July when Harris was made the nominee. But let's just get right into it. We'll start off with New York because I've seen some people say it might be likely blue, and I just think that they're kind of letting the right wing bias show a little bit too much here. Again, I think Harris, I think she's on track to win New York by about 15 percentage points. And that kind of agrees with what Emerson College found in Siena. They said it was a 13 to 14% lead. I think it's going to be about a 15% lead. So we're going to see New York shift from a 23-point win for Democrats in 2020 to a 15-point win. And that's just kind of how it is. New York's trending slightly red. We saw Trump made gains in New York City back in 2024, and we're probably going to see him do that again. And we're probably going to see Long Island trend a bit more redder. But those House races, New York's 3rd and 4th, those are probably still going to go blue if Harris wins by 15. And D'Esposito is just a really bad candidate, and Suozzi is very likable. So let's keep on going through this. So we'll start off with South Carolina. We actually got in a poll there that says Trump's only up here by 9.6%. So you could make an argument here that it is likely Republican, but I'm going to still put it as safe Republican. I still think Trump will beat Harris here by about 11 points or so. But that's interesting. We got a poll out of there that has it as a little bit closer than expected. New Mexico, I'd probably still put as likely blue. I think Trump's just out of reach there. Most polls show Harris leading by a good amount here. In Virginia, some people have said Virginia's lean blue. I kind of just don't see it. I mean, they did say Republicans are doing well in the early vote in Virginia, but it's really kind of too early to make a generalization about that. We don't know how they voted. It could be a bunch of moderate Republicans that actually voted for Harris in this state. We don't even know for sure. But according to the polls, Harris is up here by about 7 to 8%. I think she wins Virginia by about 8. So it shifts 2% to the right. That's kind of what I'm expecting here. And most polls agree with my take. Emerson and Morning Consult agree. So I just don't see it. I think Trump is toxic towards the state of Virginia, especially in the suburbs here. Alaska, we have a few polls out here, and Trump is not doing the best here. We're probably going to see it shift to blue yet again, and it'll go to a likely Republican state. Trump probably wins it by about 8%, I would say. Iowa and Ohio, so far Trump's not leading here by over 10%. He's actually only leading in Ohio by 7 on average, which is pretty good for Sherrod Brown in that Senate race. And Iowa, Seltzer poll, Saginaw, they only say Trump's up here by 4 or 6%. I think he's probably going to win Iowa by about 8. So similar margins in Iowa and Ohio. Nebraska's second. It could very well go safe blue this time around. We have a CNN poll that has her up by 11, a Siena poll that had her up by 9. So on average, you could say it's a safe blue district, but I'm going to put it as likely blue for now. But keep an eye on Nebraska second. It could even go safe blue, which is kind of crazy to see. But let's keep on moving. Texas and Florida. I mean, I'll talk with Florida first. Florida, so far Trump on average is only up by 3 percentage points in the state of Florida. I really don't think that's going to happen. I just think with all these Republicans registering the vote in this state, especially they have a 1 million vote advantage over Democrats here, I just think that's kind of just too insurmountable to prevent Florida from going likely Republican. So I think the polls are underestimating Trump in the state of Florida right now. I think he's going to win it by 6. So that's a likely Republican margin right there. Texas, I actually think is going to be more blue than Florida. I think Trump's only going to win Texas by about 5. So it's barely a likely margin. But so far, most polls pretty much have him up here by about 6. So yeah, likely Republican margin seems to be the average lead he's got in this very Republican state. So Texas and Florida are both likely Republican in this prediction, so basically no change. Minnesota, again, Harris picked Tim Walz. There's no shot it goes to lean blue unless Harris just gets massively overestimated in the Rust Belt. So I think she's got Minnesota pretty much on lock as a likely blue state. Going over to Maine and New Hampshire, we have gotten a lot of favorable polls for Harris in Maine and New Hampshire, showing her up by pretty good margins, so they're both likely blue states, while Trump wins Maine second by a likely Republican margin. And now we're down to the 7 interesting swing states. I guess we'll start off with the more likely ones for Harris. I think we'll go to Nevada first. And then we'll do Arizona next because it's neighboring. But in Nevada, Harris has pretty much surged to a nice lead here. She's building on that lead over time. She's just kept gaining and gaining. The only polls that actually have Trump ahead here are Republican internals, and they can only produce a 1% lead, which is just not sufficient enough for Trump to win this state. If only Republican-leaning pollsters only showing he's up by 1, that means the Democrats probably leading. And in the independent pollsters, they all say Harris has a decent-sized lead. Sometimes it's 1%, sometimes it's 3%. But I think this state is the most likely state to go towards Kamala Harris right now. So I have Nevada as a lean blue state for Harris. Let's head to Arizona next. In Arizona, it's been a bit more interesting. We did get a few more polls out here actually giving Harris a narrow lead here. So I think this is a tilt state either way now. Before I was thinking about making Arizona even a lean Republican state. But so far, just because of these leads Harris got in some recent polling, she has a shot here. But I think this is the hardest swing state for Harris to win right now. So I still have this as tilt Republican. Again, it could be to the fact that she's losing a bit of ground among Latino men. She's losing possibly a bit of ground with the more whiter, older voters in the state that Biden done well with. Just especially older voters, he was doing a bit better than Harris. That's true. But Arizona is a very highly college-educated state, so Harris still has a shot here. I don't think Trump wins Maricopa County. I think Harris narrowly takes it, but even a narrow win in Maricopa County is not enough to win the state. You need to do a bit better in the other counties as well. So I still have this as a tilt Republican state. I guess we'll head to Georgia next. So let's just take a look at the polling in that state. So far, I would probably say Trump is leading in this state. We had a Quinnipiac University poll, Atlas Intel. They all say the same thing, that Trump's narrowly ahead here. We did have a Fox News poll showing Harris up. We did have a Morning Consult poll showing Harris and Trump tied, basically. But I think this is a tilting Trump state. Usually polls in Georgia are actually really good. I think last time in 2020, they had the result as like only a 0.4% Trump lead. So it actually overestimated Trump in this state, but in general, polls are pretty solid in the state of Georgia, so I think we should put a lot of weight on them. Again, it's just dependent on the black turnout in Georgia again, and I do think Harris is going to get pretty good black turnout in this state, but would it be enough for her to beat Trump in this state? That's the part where I'm uncertain about. So far, I'm just narrowly giving Trump the state of Georgia. We don't have a lot of early vote data out of Georgia just yet. So again, I'll probably factor that into like a later prediction in the month of October based on that data. But so far, I would give this state as a narrow advantage to Trump by a tilt Republican margin. But Harris could very well win this state at the end of the day. And now I guess we could head to North Carolina, which is pretty interesting. So we did have an Atlas Intel poll that has Harris up narrowly in North Carolina. We also had a High Point University poll that has them basically tied. But most polls out of the state either have a 1 to 2% Trump lead, a tie, or a narrow Harris lead. So just looking at these polls, the Emerson poll only has Trump up by 1. Again, it's another black turnout state like Georgia. And I think that Mark Robinson, he isn't doing any favors for Trump in this state. Atlas Intel specifically said that Robinson was dragging Trump down in the state because they said Robinson, like all his scandals, is going to motivate young people to turn out against him, and that'll probably get a lot more voter turnout for the Democrats, because if you get a young voter to turn out to vote against Robinson, they're pretty likely to fill out the presidential ballot blue. So again, Trump called Mark Robinson Martin Luther King before. He compared him to that, and he said he was a great person. So they're already probably going to use that in ads in North Carolina. I think that's actually going to work in this state. So I'm pretty bullish on Harris's chances in North Carolina. I really think she's a narrow favorite here. And I know most people's maps are going to be something like this, where they split the swing states like 4-3. I think it's more likely we see they split the swing states like 5-2 or 6-1, because that's generally what happens. They usually one candidate wins most of the swing states, not like evenly split like the 2000 election was. So I think Harris has a narrow advantage in the state of North Carolina. I think long-term trends are actually good for Democrats in North Carolina. We saw in 2016 it went from R+4 to R+1 in 2020. So it shifted 3 points to the left. That research triangle area as well in North Carolina, actually I saw a lot of urban population growth. I think North Carolina is actually growing a bit faster than Georgia even in terms of population. So that's pretty good news for Democrats, and I think that Mark Robinson's scandal is just going to be enough for Harris to narrowly win over North Carolina. So let's head to the 3 Rust Belt states that will probably decide the election, specifically Pennsylvania, in my opinion. But we'll head to Michigan first, which is, I think, the most likely swing state Harris will win. Well, Nevada, or Michigan, then Nevada. Those are the 2 most likely swing states. But so far, Harris has a lead here. Again, Republican internal polls can't even show a decent-sized Trump lead. I guess 3% is a pretty decent-sized one. Mitchell Research, I'm pretty sure this is done by a Republican group that was sponsoring them. They can only show a 1% Trump lead here. But overall, we're seeing Harris with a narrow lead here. Not a likely blue margin, but she has a narrow lead. New York Times has her up by 1. Atlas Intel, again, I don't know what they were doing in Michigan, but their sampling is like crazy. They sampled a lot more Republicans in the state, when it's actually an even party state. They sampled 6% more Republicans in this state, when in 2020, it was even among Democrats and Republicans, this state. So again, they have a bit of a sampling issue in some of these Rust Belt states, Atlas Intel, especially in Pennsylvania, that Trump winning 40% of black voters in Pennsylvania. So Atlas Intel really had some wacky sampling here in the Rust Belt. But in general, Harris is up here by an over a 1% margin, which is a lean blue margin right now. I think she wins Michigan by 2, same margin as Nevada, which I think she wins by 2. So let's head to Wisconsin and Pennsylvania up next, and I think they're both tilt states either way. We'll head to Wisconsin first. We did get some polls out here. Trafalgar only said Trump's up with a 1% lead, and when they're only producing a 1% lead for the Republican, that means the Democrats up. Typically, we saw that back in 2022. They were only able to produce a narrow lead for the Republican candidates, and then they lost a lot. They lost by a good margin in the actual election. So, again, I think Trafalgar is just going to miss the mark again. And they also had Trump up back in 2020 narrowly by 1. So, if we add up their track record here, that probably bodes badly for Republicans in 2024, that Trafalgar is only able to give them a 1-point lead. Every other pollster, however, even New York Times, Siena has Harris up by 2. Marquette University Law School, they have Harris up by 4. That's the gold standard poll. in Wisconsin. They usually do pretty well here. So in general, I think Harris is up by a tilt blue margin. I don't think she's up by over 1%. It's a much more whiter state, so Harris would struggle a bit more with white voters. There's not as much black voters as there is in Michigan and Pennsylvania, or a southern state like Georgia or North Carolina. But I still think she has a narrow advantage here, just based off the gold standard poll done here before. NYT also says Harris is leading in this state. So I'm categorizing this as a tilt blue state. And we already have Harris at 273 electoral votes because of North Carolina. But I think Pennsylvania is going to be the tipping point state. And I think that's narrowly going to go to Harris right now. Again, they did have a Trump rally here, and Trump overestimated, or the Trump campaign said they had 100,000 people. I saw the aerial photos. That was 10,000 or 20,000 people right there. They just don't know how to count people at all in a rally. So they love over exaggerating how much people they have show up at a rally. But just looking at this, again, the Republican internals here, Patriot polling, they're only able to show Trump up here by 1. Even on message, only says it's a tie. Emerson College, this is a pretty legit pollster. Sometimes they favor Republicans a bit more often than not. But it's basically a tie. The Atlas Intel poll, like I said before, they said Trump was winning 40% of black voters in Pennsylvania. That's not going to happen at all in any reality. They had a huge sampling issue in this state. Just looking at those cross-tabs there, they make no sense. There's no reality where Trump breaks 40% with blacks in Pennsylvania. That's just not going to happen. Especially because Harris, we see in polls, national polls show Harris is doing great with black voters. She's winning 80% of them in some of those polls. So that's simply not going to happen unless we're seeing a massive realignment, specifically in Pennsylvania, which is very unlikely. The other independent pollsters pretty much have Harris up here narrowly in this state. So overall, she leads the polling average by 1%. I would say it's a tilt blue state right now, similar to Wisconsin. I do think Pennsylvania and Wisconsin are going to vote with each other. So if one of them turns red, the other one will probably turn red as well. So looking at this map, Harris wins 5 out of the 7 swing states. I think one candidate's going to win 5 out of the 7 swing states right now. I don't think it's going to go 4-3. So I'm going against the grain here and saying that North Carolina's going blue and other people have it going red. I really am quite bullish on this state. I really think she's going to flip it blue this time around because it's just kind of lining up well with her. We see Robinson's scandal that'll probably drag down Trump in this state. He praised him before, so I really think it's going to happen this time around. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I'm really bullish on her chances in North Carolina. Other than that, if you're new to this channel and you enjoy this type of content, I would greatly appreciate it if you were subscribed to the channel, and let me know down in the comments below which states you have going to Trump or Harris. Is there any differences with my map and your map? Let me know. Other than that, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.